Greetings, sentient beings. This broadcast is not intended for children. There may be strong language and adult themes. So, a little different from me. I usually just do very casual chats, but I want to try to start doing some things where we try to stay on topic for a while.
Oh, good luck.
So,
I don't
that
know.
in
I think
mind,
it should be easy with this topic.
with that in mind, I've brought together a group of people to discuss what was life like before we had cell phones and the internet. Because I'm realizing what a disconnect there is with that. With like people in their 30s now just don't really have the concept of not having the internet in their pocket all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't even thought of that. I seriously, I hadn't thought that anyone under the age of 30 basically grew up with mobile phones.
Yeah,
and that's a decent age to say I don't remember there not being mobile phones. I mean, my kids don't remember there being phone boxes on almost every corner. It's like, because phone boxes aren't a thing you see anymore. They've gone. When you occasionally drive past one, and they go, "What the hell is that? Is that a TARDIS?" It's like, what?
Let's do a quick round of introductions
for Doctor Who
first.
fans.
Yeah, but my kids are Doctor Who fans.
That explains it.
Let's do a quick round of introductions first, just so everybody's familiar with our panel here. So I'll just take you in order clockwise from where I'm seeing. So first of all, we have Art Against Ignorance. What are you about? What do you do on your channel?
Okay, so it's all music. Well, it's Art Against Ignorance, so it's connecting with people on an intellectual level through music. It's about it's music with a purpose. It's getting messages across. It's doing a lot of things that people on the internet will do in the skeptic community, but it's doing it through music and art, and so I'm trying to get people together to develop a network of artists from around the world to get that point across through music and art. Essentially, that's my goal.
Okay. And Lavender Lady, so glad you could join us. I know you're joining us from the hospital now, so I wasn't even sure if you were going to be able to make it.
Oh man, yeah, I'm happy that I was able to make it. I've been just doing the chaotic stuff lately. Nothing what specific or anything like that. It's just Kate and Mage Grey Wolf and me, and occasionally you, Purple. Just doing a little of whatever we do, just talking about stuff and having a good time and being on air for 6 hours. But eventually, as I get better health and whatever else goes on, I'd like to start doing my old stuff again and bring people on and maybe the occasional interview and see what happens.
Yep. And then you have your second channel where you do cooking as the transgender chef.
Yep. And as soon as I get the apartment cleaned up, I want to start that again. Things have pretty much got out of hand. But I want to start getting things better again and see what we can do.
Well, you got a community here to help you out with things too, so we'll see what we can do to get people to help you.
Yay. And
okay. And then we have the enigmatic static Prophet of Zod.
Hello. Yes. I might look different than some of you usually see me. I'm Prophet of Zod. I have a channel where I talk about God and how I don't believe in God and do response videos. There's little to nothing musical or artistic about it. I just talk. So if you can tolerate that, then I guess might be the thing for you.
I'm just a bit shocked that you don't believe in God.
Yeah. Sorry to disappoint any of you. Hopefully I don't stick out like too much of a sore thumb. Try to
But
fly
you
under
do
the
have
radar
some
for
very
the rest of this
insightful
thing.
takes. You were one of the first atheist channels I ran across.
Well, thank
You know, I
you.
think probably definitely in the first 10 were Vice Rhino, Paul Gia, you, and Professor Stick.
What is this god of which you speak?
And which god?
Zod, where did you come up with that name?
Well, I was trying to think of a name of a channel, and I found that very difficult. And it really means literally nothing. It just popped into my head.
Okay.
I was going to do the Prophet Jeremiah, which is my actual first name, or some version of that, because way back when I was 5, the apostle of our local church family prophesied that I'd become a great man of God or a great prophet of God or something like that.
Oh my!
And so
Oh, that's brilliant.
that hasn't quite panned out yet, but
He was only off by one letter.
yeah. So I was just fiddling with things,
True.
and Prophet of Zod sounded fun and goofy, so I just kind of went with it for a lack of any better ideas.
It's catchy. I like it. I like
Mhm.
Thank
Zod.
you.
Isn't Zod
Yep.
from the Superman series?
Yes,
true.
he is.
Okay.
And I guess it thematically fits with my actual appearance because people say I look like various people from movies, but the one they most often bring up is that I look like different superheroes' dads. So the whole
Though
Zod
Zod
thing
wasn't the
fits.
dad, so
Right. It's a
he was a
vague
contemporary general. So
it's a vague
evil.
association. He's like a very horrible father figure, you could say.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have Jenny Morgan, our professional panelist.
Hi, good evening, everyone. How are you all?
Hello.
I'm here from my usual gig of dialing for dollars, and just thought I'd stop by and talk a little bit. Now, the problem here is that I'm only 7 years old, as you can tell by my picture.
Yeah, I had
So,
noticed that.
Watch your language, guys.
No fucking way.
Fuck you.
I mean, well, okay.
Hey, Neil.
And then we have Polymathic.
Hi. I'm Jenny
Jen.
as well, so which makes it nice and confusing. Hi Neil.
The
Yeah,
world is full of
I-
gens. I've noticed that.
it always is. I don't do much on my channel at all at the moment. I want to, and I just
Yeah, you've been quiet.
I just between my own recovery stuff from everything and other stuff in the family at the moment, I just have not had any time to. And quite frankly, real life takes precedence over internet most of the time. So,
Really?
yeah, it's funny that
You're living in the past. What's wrong with
Yeah.
you?
But when I do things, I usually talk about science and stuff like that because it's what interests me. I've done a lot of debunking videos. I don't do a lot of that anymore. Even more recently, when I was doing videos, I'd rather talk about the actual science than debunking other people's stupid-eyed takes on science because it's way more interesting. So you can often see me talking with people like almost a Dr. Matt who would not remember days before the internet because he is so young. So
Yeah, he's a baby.
He
baby
really
with
is
a beard.
baby. He's a short baby with a beard too.
Okay, and we have Godless Granny, who just wrapped up her show and rushed over here for us.
Yep. Hello. Yeah, I just had Randall Rouser on, which was a really pleasant conversation. And like Zod, I also do a lot of anti-theism content and debunking content.
Yeah, but you also have done a number of interviews with believers, with people who are still adhering to the faith,
Mm-hmm.
and you always maintain those in a quite dignified manner. You don't get into arguments or shouting matches with people.
I've got one coming up that probably will devolve into something like that. And I need to let Jenny know that I had to change the date on that because Jenny's going to help me with that one. I've got a gender critical coming on in a few weeks. In fact, I even asked Jenny's advice as to whether I should even host this woman because I know that her stance is that the LGBTQ agenda is satanic and Satan is
God.
trying
Oh, wow.
to force it on our community. Yes.
Well, the only reason you're going to have a little bit of problem
Let me
is
check my
you rejected my
diary.
first suggestion of a firearm.
Americans.
It's all
and
right.
guns,
You have the
I don't
mute
know.
button, Granny. You can always mute her if she gets.
Yep. That's true. That's very true. But that one will be interesting. But I also have Dr. Richard Carrier coming on July 10th. And that one is really going to be good. Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Okay, and Stephanie, you've been getting a bit more active, doing more live streams lately.
Yeah, I've done a few. I'm actually just a sailmaker and professional sailor that dabbles in dealing with idiots on the interwebs every now and again, and it can be fun and it can be aggravating. I sort of did a takedown of Sabine Hoffenstatter's garbage that
Oh,
was
jeez.
kind of fun and whatever. I try to cover topics and hang out and make bad jokes on Neil's after shows every now and then, and pop into various other places where I'm not welcome. And I'm a rabble rouser of sorts. But apparently I'll be more frequently on Women Atheists Unload on Skeptic Haven henceforward. So that'll be another gig when I'm
Okay,
not
that's going to be a
whistles
regular
on a
thing for you
race
now. That's going to be a regular thing for you going forward.
Yeah.
Okay. And then last but not least, we have Neil, the 604 atheist, who has introduced so many people to this community.
And
Yeah,
fellow
I tried to.
musician.
That's right. Yeah. Just had a jam last night, actually, and minus our bass player because he's on vacation. But the three of us went to town last night, and I hadn't sung for a while. I hadn't gotten together with him for, probably almost a month and a half, just because of stuff that was going on, like the Calgary trip, family stuff, whatever. So I went in there and sang last night, and after that, my voice was kind of hoarse because I forgot to warm up beforehand. So,
Oops.
Oh well, that's all right.
A quick shot of bourbon generally warms up the vocal cords.
If I could do that, I would do that, but I can't drink.
Oh, okay.
So I find also if you take a little bit of glycerin and water and gargle with that can help.
Okay.
That's an old what's his name from the Stones does that before shows.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm always looking for any tips that can help my voice because
There you go.
I'm always fighting
one
my
thing.
sinuses and allergies, which keep messing up my throat.
Mark Caesar says, at least I had all the real musicians at this jam last night, like the bass player. That's funny because it reminds me of a T-shirt that a friend of mine used to have. Shows the lead singer with like 3 girls on each arm, and then the lead guitar player with 2 girls on each arm, and then the drummer's got a girl on each arm, and then the bass player's holding his bass. So it's like...
Which is a reality for all the members in the band, to be honest, because the guitarist and the drummer, it's all the same deal. They just got their instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Speaking
then let's
of-
just take a quick look at who we've got on the side chat here. I don't know who this is. A long stream of characters. TP2GT.
Ooh.
And Mark Caesar, Mr. Shadow Kitty, a very stable milking stool.
Hey, Stool.
There goes the neighborhood.
Well, thank you all for joining us.
I forgot my crochet hook.
Well, do you need to step away a minute and get it?
Oh, only if Stool gets out of line.
Ah,
He's afraid of my crochet hook.
Is
Oh,
still
okay.
ever not out of line?
Well, I know that like Sloth Girl absolutely cannot sit still. If she doesn't have the crochet hook or the knitting needles,
Ah.
she goes nuts no matter what she's doing.
Hmm.
Really?
Yeah, she's got to have her hands moving all the time, which is how she has managed to knit some couple hundred hats for the homeless. Has been a project she was doing all winter.
That's
Good
cool.
on her. That's awesome.
Very cool. You know, you were talking about this stream's going to be all before the internet sort of stuff, and I was actually just having a conversation with my roommate because we were talking about songs that were popular in 1985, which I would have been 18 in 1985, and they had songs like, "Don't Change That Song" by Faster Pussycat. They had a bunch of stuff by XTC and the Smiths and the Cure, and of course Bon Jovi's first album came out before the big one that made him famous, and yada yada. And of course, we're talking about, we used to sit outside of concert places getting tickets. You couldn't order them online because there was no online, of course. So you used to camp out overnight for really big shows that people would go and be coming to town. Like a big band, like back in those days, would have been Iron Maiden or something. So yeah, that's true. And so we used to camp outside overnight just to get tickets to make sure we got decent tickets.
Neil, they still do that today. They're camping out on the sidewalk, except now they call them homeless.
yeah, but they're not in line for concert tickets though.
No, just a decent life.
Yeah,
You wouldn't want to be camping outside though now for concert tickets. You'd likely get robbed.
Yeah, it's a chance. Yeah, well, not in the sleepy little town that I used to do it in, but
So what now everybody sits with their laptop on their lap waiting for the tickets to go live and then slapping buttons on the keyboard trying to get in so that they can buy a ticket, and then they're all sold and they have to go and scalp them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, scalping's a massive issue, isn't it?
yeah.
well, don't they limit the amount of tickets you can buy now online?
Yeah, they do, but there's lots of ways around that. I mean,
Sure, multiple accounts.
yeah, and some of these big organizations that buy these tickets, they're really well set up for it. Just get in early
How much does a concert cost
Scalp
these
them.
days?
Oh, jeez. A
More than
mortgage
I can
payment?
afford.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to go to the Taylor Swift concert, and I was checking
hadn't
out
really
some
thought
prices.
of
and
that. This whole
when they
thing
came out at $4,000,
unknown before.
Did you say 4,000?
Stephanie,
Yes,
you were
I
kind of
did.
talking over Jenny there. Let Jenny finish.
Yeah, there's timing thing happening here. Delay.
Well, yeah. it
Jenny,
can
you
be
were
a
saying
delay.
about Taylor Swift.
well, I wanted to go to a concert, and I checked in on tickets and stuff like that, and the first couple of rows was $4,000, so I just left.
Holy shit!
Wow.
No.
Yeah.
Nobody's worth that. Nobody can afford that. Like 4,000 bucks.
I'd pay her $4,000.
Are you talking
She'd have to do a lot
American
more than
dollars?
Sing and dance.
Jeez, no. I'd just watch it on the internet.
Oh. So Stephanie, what were you
To be
saying there?
honest, I don't think Taylor Swift's worth $4,000 anyway. So
I was.
Biggest
I can
diff-
think of a lot of artists I'd rather see. Sorry.
Back
The
in
biggest
I was just.
The
Yeah,
biggest
like-
difference I
I was
see
just-
between pre and post internet is timing. You know, we people are so much more impatient now because we expect everything instantly. We're now used to everything happening instantly. Whereas, yeah, one big place where I saw the first place I saw the difference was in selling real estate. I used to sell real estate once upon a time, and you'd go to a closing. And when you finish the closing, it's okay. Now we'll mail the package off to the bank, and then it'll go to the attorney, and all the paperwork wouldn't be finished until a week after closing. But as soon as FedEx became a thing, everything had to be overnighted, and everything's done.
Yeah.
And I can see why, because some people did change their minds, and deals did fall through even after all the papers were signed. But I see the internet as compounding the problem because everybody expects information instantaneously now.
I was
Yeah.
thinking about that because, just like with Amazon, everybody expects overnight shipping.
Mhm.
And I remember going, and ordering things at the Sears catalog desk that you had to actually drive to the catalog center to place the order. And about 2 months later, you went back there to pick your stuff up.
Hmm.
See you, Mark.
Well, COVID changed that a lot.
Yeah, COVID
Interestingly
really did
enough.
push a lot of it.
Well, the in the broader economy, it sure did because people were one of the knock-on effects of COVID was a really serious disruption in global manufacturing and global shipping, and so you wound up having like outside the port of Shanghai, for example, there were tons and tons of boats just waiting to unload or offload. Same goes with the Port of Los Angeles. Same goes with the Port of Houston. And so, in my business, most of the raw materials in sailmaking come from offshore.
Yeah.
Woven goods from primarily Europe, strangely enough. But we were used to you place an order, and you get it the next day. So it's that whole concept of just-in-time manufacturing that became possible because of the internet was very seriously disrupted. And so it was really, really hard to fulfill the desires that that people have for instant gratification when it comes to I can't build the stuff until I get the stuff, and I can't get the stuff because everybody in Germany's sick, and
Well,
everybody
and
in
the
all the
factories
ports,
even
and there's
stopped.
nobody to unload the ships,
Yeah.
and and oh, and by the way, I got sick. That I think I don't know as that really is sunk in with people, but it's we had over the previous 20 years or so with the introduction of all this technology, gotten used to being able to be better and better and better and better at making sure people's heart's desires are fulfilled upon a wish. And it's
I
not
dig
the
that.
case really anymore.
I
I
think
just got my new Lego X-wing, so
I think one of the issues is it's part of it is just pure impatience, but then partly I start to notice that a lot of things I'm in a hurry for. It's because I have to produce something instantly, and so I feel silly sometimes sitting at my desk wondering why this wheel's spinning for 5 seconds, but then when it does, it sets me back from doing something I have to do in a really big hurry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're all a little impatient, but we're all a little swept along in this thing where we have to constantly
Yeah.
produce quick results.
Yeah, there's the expectation there that you have to deliver everything, in a matter of hours now, where it used to be a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
And along with that comes the 24/7 365. Hi, I'm on the phone. I'm here for you.
Oh, is there
Whatever,
anything more annoying
you
than being
can
on the
reach me
phone?
anytime, anywhere, anyhow. And which is like, no, what about downtime? Is there any downtime? Do we ever get any downtime? Well,
Yeah,
no, you've got your
it's called an
frickin'
off button.
phone with you. Why aren't you answering my telephone call?
Yep.
because I don't want to.
I've had a lot of trouble with that over the years because, I don't answer my phone. And, well, especially like when I'm working, I don't even carry my phone with me.
Yeah, I can't either.
I literally never
I know
answer my
this-
phone.
Well,
know
and
this-
Like,
I
seriously,
was
like
doing-
almost anybody can mimic your phone, or if it's
Yeah.
not a recognizable phone number, you're going to get on a Robart Network's radar. So I wait for a
Yeah.
voicemail and I call them back.
Well, and I was
Yeah,
doing,
I do that
home
often.
repairs and renovations. So it's like, yeah, if I'm running power tools, I'm not going to hear the damn thing ring, even if it's in my pocket.
Put on vibrate.
Yeah.
That's the fun part.
Yeah, except that I've got Tourette's, so my leg vibrates on its own randomly.
Oh,
One
That-
thing interesting.
aren't these things just the bane of our existence anyway? I mean, we've all got them, and we use them,
Yeah.
but they are a bane. I
Oh,
mean,
who's what?
it's
Do we?
yeah,
We all
it-
have them.
Yeah,
oh
well,
yeah.
yeah, the phone is not for my convenience. The phone makes me more convenient for other people.
Oh no,
When
it's
I'm-
definitely for my convenience too.
When I moved from Indiana to Alabama, I kept my Indiana phone number. And so it's really easy for me to screen calls because if it's coming from Indiana, it's a marketer. It's not someone I know.
Yeah, you screen calls now, don't you? It's like before you had these things,
Yeah.
you didn't know who was ringing you, but now it's like, well, if a number pops up that I don't recognize, I'll
Yeah.
ignore it, because you know it's more than likely, the majority of the time, it's going to be someone that you probably don't want to speak to because they're going to be trying to sell you something. So
And this is one of the things that a lot of people now, the younger people, don't understand, that the phones we had in our homes in the 70s and 80s, caller ID didn't exist. There was no way to tell
Yeah,
who it was until
that's
you
right,
picked
you
it up.
didn't know. Yeah.
Even better, try and explain a rotary dial to somebody who's under 20.
And when there were no
My God,
answering
even I forgot about
machines,
Too
Yeah.
if you didn't answer it, you didn't know who was calling until they called you back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a time when answering machines were miraculous.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that, people couldn't even leave a message if somebody didn't answer it.
Mhm.
But just the phone itself, though. I mean, the phones that we grew up with were these lovely analog things that weighed about 10 pounds and sat on your desk or table, and had this huge, gigantic bell that rang and annoyed everybody on the block. It was.
If you had two phones in your house, you were just you were top notch.
You made it.
Yeah, you had to pay
two
more, too.
connections. Yeah, wow.
My fucking sister had her own phone. I was like, why did she get one? I didn't get one.
And I'm like,
What,
She's
her own
getting
phone
better
in her
grades than
bedroom
you.
or something?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, in her
really?
own and her own line. Yeah.
Well, and the
The
pace,
parents liked her better back then.
the pace of technology keeps accelerating with how fast things come out. And I keep reflecting back. My grandfather was born at the turn of the previous century. And he had always said that when I was born, cars didn't exist. And I saw a man walk on the moon. And
Yeah.
it's like
yeah, amazing.
the rate that things have accelerated since then, with the invention of the integrated circuits and computers.
To be fair, integrated circuits have been around for a very long time.
Oh yeah.
I think all
Well,
of
the
our
general public wasn't
grandparents-
really aware of them until like about the 70s when they started having transistor radios and things.
Yeah.
I remember the first transistor radios. The first transistor radio, I can't remember the name of it, but it's just a little pocket-sized thing with a big round dial on top. You can still buy them for about $300 to $500 if they're working. But just the idea of a transistor, people would brag about how many transistors we have in this thing.
Yep.
And now you have a microchip that has a few tens of thousands.
Yeah, no,
It's outrageous.
I remember that as being part of an ad campaign for some radio that, they were boldly advertising with 6 transistors.
If
I
I had
remember-
6 transistors, it'd really be expensive, getting all their surgery done and stuff.
I got to run, guys. I got to do another show as well. But if you're still going, I'll come back in.
Okay, well, thanks
for coming,
See you
Neil.
later.
well, great having
Good.
you.
Neil. Good to meet
Hi,
you.
Neil.
Yep.
Yeah, virtually, anyways.
And that
You know
was-
what I
and that
find
was
really
the
I
mind-blowing?
still
professional-
have time confusion with Neil because he's 2 time zones further over from me. So he had thought that we were going to be actually doing it an hour earlier.
Right. Yeah. The time zone thing's an issue. We've had an issue. Myself and Godless Granny, I turned up an hour late.
Yeah.
There was a time zone thing going on there, and I got it completely mixed up. So I literally got on and had a chat for 10 minutes, I think, at the most. Turned up at the end. So yeah, the time zone's an issue.
Yeah. Time zones.
Now I wanted to ask: does anyone have a landline anymore as far as phones go?
No.
Oh, I haven't
No,
had
the-
a landline for
I know
years.
some people
You
who
don't have a home phone number anymore.
We finally got rid of ours about 2 years ago. Took me a long
Yeah.
time to convince my husband to let it go.
I don't have one since
Yeah.
I moved back to Minnesota 3 years ago. But when I was living in Michigan, not only did I have a landline, but I actually was where my mother still is living now. They still can't get internet. The only thing they can
Mm.
put on is cable
Wow.
connection.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Because the cable for the internet ends at the county highway 2 miles up the road.
Oh.
Wow.
Well, then they need to move 2 miles up the road.
Or just
Yeah,
use
they
4G.
told us it would be something like $2,700 for them to run the cable out there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we go, that's a lot, but if you want to get fiber to the home here and you're not in a fiber to the home area, it's that sort of expense in Australia. So, but our other internet's reasonably cheap.
Kids
that
can't
wasn't
even
even
do
a fiber
schoolwork
optic
with it
cable.
anymore.
That was just to get a coax there.
Yeah, Granny's right. Kids can't do their schoolwork properly without having internet anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our school
it's
district gives all the kids Chromebooks,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't submit your homework on paper anymore, except for a few assignments. Like everything's due at midnight on a certain day through Google Drives, which is really strange.
Well,
Yeah.
the internet's gone
You
from
can't-
this
you
thing
can't
that people used because it was interesting to becoming a utility. It is
Mhm.
something that has
Yep.
become a requirement now, which is a weird thing. If you think about it, internet has replaced libraries, has replaced newspapers, has replaced so many things that we used to take for granted when we all grew up. You know, your parents would buy the newspaper and you'd go and look at the cartoons, or you'd because the rest of the newspaper was boring when I was a kid.
You can't even
and,
get a job today without the internet, because that's the only way people take applications now.
Yeah.
yeah. And libraries frustrates me because as a kid, I used to love going to the library.
Yeah. Love the library. I mean, they're still
Libraries
there,
were-
but
they're still there,
You
but-
don't have to go. You just don't need it.
Yeah.
I have to
But
wonder.
in some places, they're not there anymore. In some areas, it's more expensive to run the library than its value to the community. And
That's
that's
right.
sad.
Yeah.
That is very sad. When we start losing books and we start relying on a medium like the internet, which is editable, this is why you cannot trust Wikipedia as a source for information, because it's editable, because people change it and people are assholes. You start having people who get the wrong idea about things because they are being educated by people who are thicker than they are. And this is why you end up with flat earthers. And you end up
talking
with,
about U.S. congressmen?
Fundamentalist idiots. But it's true, because the internet is being used as a form of indoctrination by some people.
Yeah.
And it's a very good tool for that,
Well,
unfortunately.
As far as
Just look at all the
libraries go,
anti-vaxxers we have now. And that's a product of the internet.
And you talk about libraries. I wonder how many kids there are now who have never used a card catalog. I remember having a class in school.
They don't even have them
Or have
anymore.
even heard about the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Even
I've
if you
met
go to the library,
librarians
it's
who've
all
never
looked up
used a
on the
card
terminal.
catalog.
Yep.
Sorry, Pips.
Yeah, the library was very important to me. As a child, the library was my only sanctuary. I got bullied at school. I got bullied at home. The library was the only place I could be left alone.
Yeah.
And it was so important to me and my late fiance when she was growing up that that was the only permanent memorial to her in New York.
Yeah, such a secure place to be, the library. It feels nice to be in there, and the silence and all the books. And I mean, there's still something about, I know, like, everything's on your phone, or you might have a Kindle or whatever, but going to the library and opening that actual book with pages, there's still something special about it. That
books are tactile. The actual act of reading through a book, turning the pages, is very tactile. It's a very calming and relaxing experience. And you do not get that holding a Kindle. You do not get that reading a book on your phone. You do not get that listening to an audiobook. Books are different. They're immersive in an entirely different way.
Well, when you're handling a physical object, it's implying all of your senses. That you have the tactile feeling of the pages, you have the smell of the paper, you have the crisp sound when you turn the page.
One of the most glorious places in the city of Boston is the Boston Public Library. The building itself is amazing. The art inside is amazing. The reading rooms are amazing. The whole experience is amazing. It really was a lot of fun.
There
going
are
there. And
unfortunately,
I used to go
agreed.
there almost at least once a week. I mean,
Yeah.
it was go to the library. You know, you write down. You go to the card catalog. You write down the books you want. They bring the books to you. You know, it wasn't open stack, so you'd write down the books you want, and they'd bring the books out to you, and you'd sit at a desk and read, or you'd
Or walk
take
out
them
of the
out,
library,
you
like
know.
that feeling of walking out and you've got all these books that you're so excited
Oh,
about
yeah,
reading.
yeah.
You've just got a stack of like 5-6 books, and it's like, yes,
Yeah,
you know.
Demon
But
Orb was mentioning about the
the
microfiche.
experience was marvelous. All these little nooks and crannies, the reading rooms, and the little there were little alcoves outside, a little
Yep.
courtyard you could sit in and stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I spent
really,
a
it's
lot of
like an
time-
adventure.
wonderful public institution.
I spent a lot of time at the
Absolutely.
libraries going through the microfiche of, you know, backdated magazines and old newspapers when I was trying to do historical research.
Mm-hmm.
it's unfortunate, but I have seen various blurbs and newsletters and stuff online where there are some smaller communities who are looking at closing down their libraries because of lack of use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that's
unfortunately, a
happening
lot of
everywhere.
towns are feeling that, yeah, they don't merit the cost of upkeep anymore.
Yeah.
On that
Uh,
note,
Crayons
fair-
taste nice, by the way.
To be fair, Perps, I think the loss of microfiche is one thing I can deal with. Mostly because the film that they're on has a tendency to decay over time anyway.
Oh,
And
yeah.
having digital storage that you can search, especially when you're doing research, it makes a lot more sense. So scanning
yeah,
your
no,
documents and storing them on computer is just, it's one aspect of upgrading technology that I think is worthwhile in libraries, because using a microfiche machine is a skill in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
I do have fond memories of microfiche machines, though, because when our school would go to the library, that was like playing a video game back then. In terms
I
of
guess.
there were actually lights and you could move things around. Everyone would want to hover over and play with those.
Well, I know I actually had to become rather skilled at doing maintenance and light repairs on the machines, because so often people would use them not gently enough. So yeah, I got to be known at the library that I'd come in and they'd point out to me which machines they'd been having problems with, and I'd have to spend an hour trying to get the machine back in order before I could use it.
hadn't occurred
I
to me
attribute-
before, but it just strikes me that one of the charities or one of the enterprises that Andrew Carnegie decided to devote his philanthropy to were public libraries in small towns throughout the United
Yes.
States. And so here's an example of this guy, a steel magnate, billionaire, well, one of the richest people in the world for the time, donates
The
goes
guy
out and
that
basically
Think and
says,
Grow
here's,
Rich
here's
was
the
written
money.
about.
Here's the
Was
money
that based on
to,
Andrew Carnegie?
Here's the money to establish an institution where people can have access to knowledge, and here's the money. I'm stepping away. And the difference between then and now is that
Yeah.
people like that are not doing that out of a philanthropic principle, but as a way to make some cash. Right. So we've got our Google. You could call Google is the internet public library these days, but they ain't in it for the philanthropy. They're in it for the money.
Well, that is the way of
Yeah.
that is the way of the internet. Everything on the internet is there to try and make money in some way. It's such a, considering what it started out as with DARPANET and then moving into the universities as a way of sharing information freely between the universities at the time. The baseline of the internet now is all profit. It's what it's about.
But we've
It
been
is a
consumer driven for a long time. We just have a different approach now that we have the internet.
Yeah. And we've had it for a long time. I mean, the internet in its consumer environment has been around for 30 years.
Yeah.
So anyone, as we said before, anyone under 30 is not going to remember a time when they didn't have access to the internet.
I attribute my remaining a believer for as long as I did primarily to not having access to the internet as a young adult. When I was in college, Josh McDowell came and spoke at our college, and he said that no archaeological find has ever disproven anything in the Bible. And I
Jeez.
held to that for decades. You know, anytime I started to doubt my faith, I always reminded myself that, hey, nothing has ever disproven anything in the Bible. So when my son came to me and could prove to me that the flood didn't happen, that was earth-shattering for me. and you know, I could have accessed this for the last 20 years, but because I was so ingrained in it at that point, I never thought to.
Thank you, internet, for giving us godless granny.
Well, I mean, it's a two-edged sword, the internet, isn't it? It gives and it takes away. If you're discerning enough and critically thinking enough, the benefits to you as a person having that wealth of knowledge right there at your fingertips is amazing.
Yeah.
But
if you sift
can't
through all the crap,
bullshit,
because there was a lot of bullshit. So you need to learn how to find the good information and learn how to source that rather than
one of the problems
going down
I
a
have
rabbit
is
hole with rubbish.
The internet being used as a crutch in education is actually reducing the amount of critical thinking and research skills that our children are being taught.
Yeah.
Which means that we're going to end up with a generation, not the Zs, the ones after the Zs, who are not going to have those skills and are going to just believe anything that they see because it was on the internet.
Well,
and
to be fair,
that isn't good.
Go ahead, Jenny.
I said they're going to be flat earthers.
Okay, and Stephanie's got her hand up.
That's a
How many
psychological.
of y'all remembered Gopher?
Yeah.
I live in Minnesota. Everything's named Gopher here.
Yeah. Archie.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lynx.
Nope.
Yeah.
What was your first graphical browser?
Netscape.
Mosaic.
All right.
Yeah, I guess mine
Who
was
said
Netscape.
Mosaic? Yay for you.
Yes, I did, but I never used Mosaic, even though it was out when. I mean, I set up one of the first internet providers that was in my area, back in the day when internet providers could be smaller companies that were providing internet access, and even then we sort of recommended Netscape over Mosaic, just because the interface was a little bit easier for people to get to grips with. I mean, there wasn't a big gap between when the first Mosaic browser came out and when Netscape came out.
Well, my first internet experiences
was at Urbana Champaign.
Yeah.
Champaign. And
my first
that's where it
internet
came from. The
experiences
code
were with
base is the
Commodore
same.
64 and
Yeah,
a
I had
300 baud
one of those,
modem.
yeah.
So I started out using CompuServe.
Oh,
I
I
think
started.
to circle back to the bigger, I think, overarching topic that started this. I think with kids in church and stuff, like Godless Granny, you said that you held on to a long-standing false belief because of lack of the internet. I think it does do a lot of bad. It lets the crazy people find each other, and it naturally steers us toward algorithm-driven echo chambers. That is very unfortunate, but I do tend to see it as a net good, simply because we all started in echo chambers to begin with. You just couldn't get out of it as easily. And you were gonna, I'm a little torn because I think there is a really bad lack of research skill and critical thinking and false information that comes from the internet. But I'm not entirely sure, at least anecdotally, based on my experience with a crowd I ran in my church environment, that there was a lot more of that skill in earlier generations, depending on where you were at. So I think it's a very complex question. I think there is a lot of bad that comes from the internet, but having grown up in a church where I literally couldn't find outside information and it was demonized, I think the fact that a kid can hear something in church, whether it's a claim about apologetics or evolution or history, or simply a stupid urban legend a pastor used to make a point and everybody laughed at, the fact that a kid can immediately go home and Google that, I think, is a huge thing. And they're not all going to become atheists or even look to become atheists, but they're making those to where
it's accessible
the little box
for them.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Definitely think the net gain of what we've accomplished with our technology is worth it. But we have also fallen into traps because of it, and that needs to be addressed to a certain degree.
Yeah, I'm not even necessarily trying to rebut anybody's point. I think it's complicated, and I am horrified at some of the stuff that's out there and people can find.
I mean,
back when I was younger,
ease of access to certain things. I mean, we get Republicans screaming now about childhood grooming. The easiest spot for anyone to groom is the internet, if there is a groomer out there, and that the wealth of access to pornography for teenagers, where there is no gatekeeping for that pornography at all on the internet, is just outstanding. It's like there is a lack of parental responsibility in some quarters when it comes to the internet, and this is what it comes down to with anything. I mean, if you take your kids to the library back in the day and you let them run around, how many of those kids are going to go and find the photographic books that have the nude people in them? A lot of kids are going to go and do that because it's what kids did. You know, it was the thing that a lot of kids would go and find the dirty bits because it was something they weren't supposed to do. You give them the internet and they can do that very easily. And then it comes back to parental responsibility. And I think there's a level of where the technology has grown faster than the parental responsibility has. In that we as parents don't necessarily don't always understand what's available to the kids to get over the internet. And therefore, I'm not saying that we need to hamper our kids in their learning experience. Kids should grow up on their own and learn their own stuff. But there is a degree of responsibility as parents to make sure that the kids aren't looking at things that are actually going to destroy their lives.
Well, and I think that's part of the problem we're having is that we're at a stage where a lot of times the kids understand the technology and how to search for things much better than their parents do.
But that was the same for us, Perps. I mean, we as we grew up understood the technology better than our parents did. Even when the first 8-bit computers like the Commodore 64 and the Apple II came out and all that, it was the kids who understood them and not the adults. The adults bought them because, they were new things and their kids could learn from them. But it was the kids who got to understand them. Those kids helped bring in the next generation. And it is the same now. I have a great understanding of computers, but I know a lot of kids who understand them better than I do. And that's weird because I've worked with it all my life. And it's just the fact that it's new technology and they get it.
Well, it's just in their psyche now.
No matter what technology is available at any given point in time, people tend to be in ruts, and the only way you get out of a rut is to use the technology to find other venues and more information. And I think that, Zod, I think you're right, that the opportunities for doing that are far, far wider now than they ever were before. You had to intentionally seek out new philosophies, new ways of thinking. You had to be open to finding other in real life encounters with different people, with different social realms of organization. It's a great deal easier to find those now, which is good. But it's the in real life thing that is a little bit missing.
I was just thinking of of
You know?
a joke I remember from the old days, and it kind of goes like this: why do teenage boys hide their Playboy under the mattress? Because that's where Dad does.
That's true.
I think one of the things with parental responsibility takes on a lot of dimensions now, because partly you want to monitor, but on the other hand, unless you're going to follow your kid to school and around every friend that they go to, it's not just a matter of monitoring what they do on their computer at home. They're going to see something on a phone or laptop or something somewhere. And so I think you want to try to maintain some kind of control over what they do depending on the age. But a huge thing you need to do is be prepared for a lot more blunt conversations and anticipate a lot more things coming into their lives that you can't stop being there, and help them process it versus control it.
The other side of that is we don't want to become hypocrites in that. There is a point of where you're watching what your kids are doing and trying to keep a lid on what they have access to without it stepping over the things of indoctrinating. And it can be a very hard line for a lot of parents. Like, no, I don't want you to see and do this or whatever, because it doesn't fit in with how I think. And when you start instilling your ideas on your children in a way that it kind of controls the way that they should be thinking, then you're indoctrinating. And indoctrination doesn't just have to be about religion. It can be about anything. And we shouldn't do that with our kids. We should be instilling free thinking, critical thinking in our children so that they can make decisions for themselves.
You're a communist.
Well,
my son listens to Focus on the Family stuff in his room at my house, and I'm not totally glad about that, but I let him do it because he has to explore what he believes, and he has a good head on his shoulders, and we openly
He'll figure
talk
it out
about
for
it
himself.
Yeah, I'd rather let him do that and openly talk about it. He'll play them with me in the car sometimes as we're driving, and I'll just listen to it. I won't dump all over it, but I'll ask him questions and talk about it. Otherwise,
may I ask a question?
Good approach.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you aware that Focus on the Family is one of the several base conspirators in this entire attack on trans people?
Yes, I have no use for them at all. And depending on the kind of stuff he was listening to, I would take more issue than with others. This is more, he doesn't entirely live at my household, and he has the chance to find this stuff one way or the other. And so
I thought we were still talking like high school kid. Never mind.
Oh, he is high school, but he lives partly at a fundamentalist household and partly at my household. And so that's a big part of it. My approach might be a little different, but in general, I have huge issue with Focus on the Family, and I as an institution, and it partly would depend on what he was consuming from them. I am fully aware, and that is part of my heartburn with that being specifically what he listens to. But I would rather he explore himself and find out and learn. He's starting to get it. He will acknowledge certain things on a lip service level, but then also, and I think he really means it, but you can tell the little gears are turning, and that's the best thing you can have happen for a kid, is to have the gears turning. He could very well turn out to be a Christian for the rest of his life, and I'm totally cool with that, as long as he's a decent person. But I would rather be there and give him the opportunity to explore and let him know he's fine whether he's a Christian or a non-believer or whatever, as long as he maintains decent humanitarian standards.
Yeah. And to bring this back to the audience listening, for those of you who might be too young to remember, things like religion, political views, social views, these kinds of things were pretty much universal between most people in the United States. It was extremely rigid. It was extremely controlling, and it was tragic. I mean, we were trained to do things like, if you're walking home, for example, and somebody is lowering the American flag down the pole, you have to stop and put your hand over your heart and wait for it to come to the ground before you can leave. You know, that's
Yeah.
it was far beyond saying the pledge in the morning. It was all kinds of things.
Yeah, so different to us in America. Because if I saw somebody putting an Australian flag up in their front yard, I'd say, "What the fuck's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
Because
Well, and
it's not something we
unfortunately-
do here. We're quietly proud
Well, you
to
see
be
the
Australian.
occasion, you see the occasional one, but it's not. It's
Yeah,
not
it's
common.
like,
Yeah.
and most Aussies go, "What the fuck? Why?
Yeah, what do you?
Why? Why are you doing that?"
Well, I
Stop
think it
being
would
a
be.
dick.
I think it would be much different if you lived in a country that loved freedom.
Yeah, which America doesn't.
I'm being sarcastic, by the way.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because I grew up with all that respect for the flag and learning the proper way to fold it and everything. You
Yeah,
know,
no.
and I really do feel a level of resentment with what MAGA people have turned the American flag into.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that it's something I can't have any pride at all in anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have a way different impression of seeing an American flag fly now than I did 10 years ago. Or
Yeah.
See, you guys would be all like American Independence Day. I bet a lot of people dress their cars up with flags on them and stuff like that. Yeah. It happens here a bit in Australia on Australia Day.
Yeah.
And every time I drive past somebody who dresses their car up with a whole heap of Aussie flags, I go, "What a cunt!" Is basically the thought that comes to my mind. It's like you obnoxious self-appointing prick. Why have you got the Aussie flag all over your car? It's distracting.
I
them
just
off.
hate
Have just
nationalism
one.
overall. It's just dumb. Look, it's about people. It's about the planet. It's not about countries and flags. And it's like, fuck off.
Yeah,
Just care about.
I've
people,
always agreed
you know?
with that whole thing of you can be quietly proud to be an Australian, but you don't need to shout it from the rooftops.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
that is, I think, how most Aussies think. We're just quietly proud that we're Australian, but we don't.
Well,
we're not
whatever
gonna
country
shout
you
it.
live in, it just happens to be the place you were born in. So
Yeah. So what difference is
it's
it?
random. Who cares? We're people.
It's just-
That's what matters.
I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, the birthplace of American liberty, where the first shots of the American Revolution were actually fired. And we all grew up learning the 5 people that died on the Lexington Battle Green on April 19th, 1775.
Christmas addicts.
And I grew up in a time when the Vietnam War was at its peak, and I remember my junior in high school I was a junior in high school in 1970 that spring, and the school walked out to the Lexington Battle Green and sang songs of protest for the horror that took place in Kent State, Ohio, where 5 people were killed. So I think it's there's cultural context as well in all of this. It depends on when, where, and how aware people are. Certainly, in my experience, there were young Americans for freedom among my peers, and I like to remind young people today that, like, look, you like to look at us, like to look at boomers as the problem, and once all those people die, it'll all be good. Well, let me tell you something. I grew up with, Donald Trump's not that much older than me. Neither is Joseph Robinette Biden, and the two are completely different people. And I would suggest to younger folk, look to Matt Walsh. Don't let him be your future, because he's your age. He's your age.
Yeah.
True.
You've got to keep your eyes open to
And Ben Shapiro and all those
you've got to keep your eyes open to the people that are going to undermine your future, and they're not us, because we're going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right that we're going to die, but some of us were fighting the fight that you are engaged in right now 50 years
20,
ago.
30 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. There is nothing worse than you trying to use boomer or you're a Gen Xer as an insult. Anyone who does that, young people out there, you're idiots, because one day you are going to be those people, and you are not going to. You're either going to be people who are pro change or not pro change, and that's got nothing to do with your age. That's all to do with your upbringing, all to do with how your outlook on life is, what your religious background is. You can be a dickhead no matter what your age is, and that's got nothing to do with your age.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I legit thought that
don't
we'd
use
won
that as an insult.
I legit thought that we'd won the battle, socially, politically. We had won. Those of us who believed in social justice, in equality for LGBTQ people, for racial minorities, and all of this. I legit thought that that battle was won. A lot of people did. A lot of people thought that, Roe v. Wade was decided in 1972. I was just out of high school right then, and we thought we'd won, but we hadn't, because the people who were opposed to this, whether within my generation or proximate to, were the people that were fighting the long game. And I don't think that people change a great deal, to be honest. And the worst thing on earth is to be self-satisfied, because the struggle for freedom from oppressive systems of thought is something that goes on generation after generation after generation, and if you're not careful, you wind
That's why
up
we still have
repeating
Nazis
the
now, even though the
mistakes.
Second World War ended over 70 years ago.
Yeah.
The Nazis that we have now are the product of the long game that Stephanie was mentioning. That began in the Reagan era, when a bunch of Republicans who are also theocrats, but theocrats was a word that was never used. These were people who were never seen in public, but they were all significant people in the political forum. They just weren't elected, so nobody knows them. And
I just have to cut in
raised-
here briefly. We've just passed the hour mark, and I didn't ask anyone here to commit for more than an hour. So if anybody needs to go now, fully understand.
I'm good to
But
hang around.
I'm perfectly willing to hang in here and keep this going for at least another half hour.
Can I bring up something that's more innocent and getting back on track with talking about time before the internet?
Yep.
Okay. Does anybody remember street directories, road maps?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Like
yeah. Bane of my life.
Exactly. Like now, Google Maps. Just put your phone on. It's sitting there, like talking about technological advances and how the internet's improved society. Like that's unquestionably.
Yeah, I had to have one of
But
those.
I use Google Maps like I used to use a directory. My thing with the directory was I'm one of those people who had to turn the directory to face the direction I was driving in. So that
yeah.
Granny knows.
Because you couldn't swap it
My
around in your
husband thinks
brain.
that's
No, I
weird.
can't. Yeah. That's why I used to get
My
from
wife's
people
like
what
that
the hell
too.
are you doing? It works.
Yeah.
So what I do now is if I need to look up where something is, which isn't often now because where I live now, because I basically know my way around because I grew up here. But when I was living in Perth, what I'd do is I'd look up the address
Try
using
driving in
Google
Sydney.
Maps, and then I'd memorize it. So if you knew the main roads and arteries to get to each suburb, you'd only have to remember the bit about the suburb. And once I'd memorized the bit, it was fine. I could do that all in my head and drive to where I needed to go, because that was much better than having a stupid app sitting on the on the dash telling me to turn left in
Jen,
100 meters. It was really annoying. I
Yeah.
hate that.
Jen, I think it would
love
be,
it.
I think it would be a real interesting study to take the new kids of today in their 20s and ask them to draw maps of where they live. Because I know that, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was there for 60 years. and I know certainly every major road and most neighborhoods in that city. And if I only get an address, I know where to go.
Yeah.
Because it's all in my head. Just like I've heard London taxi drivers are that the entire city is in their head.
I doubt
and
that
I wonder
now,
how many young
but
people
yes.
don't bother learning their streets and everything because they got the internet. I can just whip out GPS.
Yeah, no, people don't
yeah.
learn the name. To be
Yeah.
fair, I never learned the names of streets. I learned where to go. So if somebody said a name of a street, I might have to look it up and then go, oh yeah, I know how to get there. That's fine because there's too many street names and I'm dreadful with names anyway. But yeah,
You just recognize
I
areas
totally
and
agree with you.
landmarks
Oh,
and things. You don't need to know a street name.
I am horrible with directions. I have great trouble doing the mental mapping. That even if
Yeah.
I've been to a place a half dozen times does not mean I can find it again.
Oh,
Robin told me the most interesting story about a kid that was on a school trip in Paris and the teacher got lost and the kid told the teacher how to get where they were going and was absolutely right. They followed his directions and he had no problem getting around. And they said, how did you know this? And he said, I play Assassin's Creed. All the streets in Paris are in the game.
Okay, well,
I
there's
am
something
a
you should
sailor.
+1 for technology.
I
And the internet, obviously.
I am a sailor, and I will attest to the fact very happily that GPS is a hell of a lot easier than either Dead Reckoning or Celestial Navigation.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's considerably less involved.
Yeah,
And you can
if
flick
I
a
didn't
switch
have a
and find
GPS
out
in
where
my
you are
vehicle-
on the globe and where you are on the ocean, it is very, very comforting without having to go through several bits of calculation to say, okay, this is my last sun site and these are my DR points, and while you
That's
still
that
need
without
to
a good
do
clock,
both of
you
those
can't
things
find exactly where you
because
are.
the friggin' technology could break down at any point in time. It is a serious comfort to know that flick a switch.
I think we as a social group and the mass country, everybody together have lost a lot of abilities because in our cases because we had those skills but we haven't used them, so that they're kind of on the back shelf. We could probably still call them back, but we don't bother trying. And the young people who just don't even try because they don't have to, because they got all the modern conveniences like phone numbers. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, I don't remember.
What kid knows any of their friends' phone numbers?
Exactly. I used to
Okay,
memorize.
how many
You'd
kids
have a
know
list
their
of
own
10,
phone number?
15 phone numbers in your head that you could remember. Whereas now
I used to
know
have-
my phone number and my wife's, and that's about it.
When I had my shop, I had 2.5 pages of typewritten phone numbers. And no, they weren't typewritten; they were actually on a computer at about 10-point font. Single space, 2 full pages, front and back. And I knew all those numbers. I made the list for the people in the shop that didn't know.
Yeah.
And you could just say, "Oh yeah, that's 263-2500," or whatever you're dialing.
Honestly, these days, I probably wouldn't know Sloth Girl's phone number if I didn't have to punch it in every time I pick up her prescriptions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it too. I'm not, trying to be holier than thou. I don't know my brother's phone number. I don't know my nephew's phone number. I know my mom and dad's phone number because it's 0.
But I still remember 800-325 3535.
What on earth is that?
It's actually Sheridan Hotel, but they made a commercial of that and it played for years. And the phone number
wow.
just was ingrained in your head from the commercials.
The 800 system had just come out.
Mhm.
Yeah, something similar like that for people who live in Western Australia is the telethon phone number. Before we had extra area codes added in, they used exactly the phone number every year for doing the fundraising, and it was 32111211. And they had a song about that, so everybody remembered it, and it was really annoying, just like a freaking earworm.
I still remember
But-
my home phone number from 1959.
Wow.
321 3072.
I still remember the phone number from the house I grew up in, even though the area code for it changed 3 times.
Wow.
I need to get going. So, but thank you
Yeah.
very much for
Okay.
having me on, Purple. It's
Oh, well,
been
thanks
fun.
for
Bye, Grant.
coming.
Granny,
Yes.
you and I need to talk with that question that you asked. I don't know what
Okay.
you're talking about. Okay.
No problem. All right. Bye.
Nice to see you. Bye.
Okay, and
Ricky,
yeah,
don't lose that number.
I will have the links for everybody who was on the panel in the description. So if anybody wants to follow up or check on them later.
I'll go back to a point you brought up earlier, Perps, about the progress of technology and how it seems how much it's happened. Well, one of the things about progress of technology is we required the technology to progress the technology, especially when you're talking about electronics. But it's the same in every field. By making the original progress in technologies is always slow because we have to develop the tools to make the next generation, and it's always the one generation helps you make the next generation. So as each generation becomes more powerful, getting more powerful tools is easier, and the computing industry is the one area where that is very, very apparent. So that whilst there was no technical reason we couldn't have built, say, a 486 processor in the 70s. The fact that everything about a microprocessor in the 60s and 70s was laid out by hand, checked by hand, and then you had to draw the lithographs by hand to create the filming down to the resolution where they could then etch the CPUs meant there was a limitation to how small you could make things. And it was the limitation of people's capabilities. But as we made slightly better CPUs as we went along and made larger memories and stuff like that, we went to being able to store all of those things actually within computers themselves and have the computers create the lithography, and that meant we could make the chips more dense. And then we eventually got down to the point.
I keep dropping out. The weather is obviously
I can see lightning.
What's happening? It's not lightning, but it's windy as out there, so it must be affecting my signal. So I'm dropping in and out. If I go, then it's out of my control. Anyway, sorry to butt in.
No, that's okay. So yeah, basically, it takes us a long time to get going, but once you get going, your degree of development, it sort of escalates up until a point where you hit a wall, and that wall comes down to the physical properties of the universe. So there's only so many transistors that you can fit on a chip before those transistors start being basically a couple of atoms across, and at that point you've got quantum effects taking place which stops them working properly. In fact, some new chips actually rely on the quantum effects of tunneling to make sure that the transistors actually function properly. So they're actually relying on quantum mechanics to make chips happen the way that they do. But you end up hitting these physical limitations, and then we have to figure out ways around those physical limitations. So yeah, we've hit a wall and things slow down again, but technology begets better technology.
Yeah.
And that's the same in everything. And I'm sure Stephanie can tell me a sailboat analogy to it.
Oh, I probably could, but this actually is a funny thing to me. It's like, especially when engaging with theists in whatever venue. I mean, these folks who think that the world is 6,000 years old and that God is responsible for all of this stuff. It's like,
it is 6,000 years old, isn't it?
Well,
no, it's more than 6,000, but yes, it is at least 6,000.
Well, it's at least 6,000 years old. I'll agree with that. It's probably a little bit more. Yeah, I think. But you're sitting here talking on a computer that relies on quantum mechanics to operate at all.
Yeah.
And yet you're sitting here saying that none of this is real.
Yeah.
Huh? No.
Yeah.
The reality.
If you can't deny parts of science and accept others, it doesn't work.
Right. The reality is the science, and it's not. And it wasn't. God did not deliver. Didn't deliver the 10 sayings on a chip. unless you consider granite a chip, I suppose. It's like, come on, people. It's just you're sitting here denying science when science is enabling you to spread your Bronze Age bullshit.
Well, the
in
big
real
difference
time
really,
across the goddamn world.
the big difference really has been, how much communications has accelerated. That it was a big breakthrough when they got the telephone and people could talk to people, in other states instantly. But there was also a big jump, I feel, with the internet that, even in the 90s, to send a photograph across the internet took several minutes. Now it can be done in a matter of a couple of seconds. And yeah, obviously, a picture or a graphic image can communicate a lot more concrete information to somebody than, just a paragraph of text could.
What I
Does
find
anybody?
what I
Sorry.
find really what I find really mind blowing is not just that my kids live in a totally different world than I do, but one thing that puts it in perspective for me is my older kids lived in an entirely different world than my younger kids live in.
Yeah.
Like that's how fast it's going. The way they did their homework, the amount of internet that was available to them, and how it's like they're living completely different experiences. So it's like not only generation by generation, but within the same generation, people are living different lives, and there's almost like a culture gap, I think, even between my own kids.
That's interesting.
And
'Cause it moves
as
that quick.
as a kid whose siblings were born in the late 30s, I was born in the early 50s. There was quite a gap between my siblings and myself. Same parents, same upbringing, essentially.
Of course, every society.
But
Go ahead.
it's absolutely true. I mean, the conversations I had with my siblings, with my 15-year-old sister and 17-year-old brother, it's like they grew up in a very, very different world. They were in high school in the 50s. I was in high school in the late 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Very, very different world. Very, very different world. And as everyone here on the panel has said, the pace of change is doing nothing but accelerate. So it begins. So the generations are collapsing in terms of relative to the change in technology. I think that's a really fascinating thought.
Yep.
And every technology is going to hit a wall. There is a point where there are physical constraints that will stop that technology from developing at the pace it has been. So, like, we look at our modern motor cars, the things that are different about cars now to what the cars were in the 70s is all the electronics in them. And it's the electronics that are developed more so than the car themselves. And, okay, we've got electric cars, but electric cars actually predate petrol ones.
Yeah, Jenny had been waiting for Stephanie to finish, so.
To kind of dovetail on what you're saying, Steph, our society, I mentioned it happens in all societies in the world, but in our society, we have certain universal truths, though, that do not change, that have gone on since I can remember when I was a kid in the 50s and 60s. Example being, they used to burn Elvis Presley music. And it's the same damn people who are burning books today. People today. They're just a bunch of cranky old control freaks. And they have never changed. And they never will.
Well, and they are people.
Yeah, but the cranky old control freaks whose parents were burning the Elvis pictures in the 50s.
Oh, in a lot of cases,
actually
it's the
have
same
Velvet
people.
Elvis is on the fucking wall right now. It's like the king.
Yeah, but there are a percentage
Hypocrisy.
of people who are clearly resisting the change as much as they can. They don't want to give things a chance to change.
True. Absolutely true. And I can't personally understand that. I'm okay. You know, I talked to the young people today, and I freely admit to being a boomer. And we were attaching onto this earlier. Every generation blames the generation before. Okay, but every generation before created the world the generation now lives in. So they're blaming the generation before for what they live in, and in some cases that is gloriously wonderful, like communications and social interactions, and you know how widespread your life can be. But it's all our fault.
I think the thing that everybody, when they talk about things like that, the previous generation, it really comes down more to capitalism than anything else that people are that young people are complaining about.
Oh, I agree.
Because in many ways, okay, there's positives. It's not all going to be negative, but it's the whole capitalism thing, which is just separating society and making us get further and further between the very rich, the haves and the have-nots. And that's what people have an issue with. It's not about other things that have been set up by people before us. We're here because people before us, you know, put us here and made the world the way it is. And that'll continue on. But there's always good things and bad things. And I think it's capitalism that's out of control.
I think a big part of the problem is that capitalism makes everything into a competition and really gives the connotation that cooperating is a bad thing.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. Because it is about, it's about competition and always trying to get something for yourself. It's about selfishness and not about compassion and caring about your fellow human. Capitalism is not about that. It's consumer-driven, and consumer-driven society is not one that cares about people. So, you know, there's a difference.
Cares about things instead of people.
Cares about things rather than people, and the almighty dollar, ultimately.
Look at our laws. I mean, even down to our laws. If you steal and trash someone's car, you will go to prison longer than if you rape them. How is that a compassionate society?
Exactly.
What is wrong with us?
Perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah, and our police forces really are only to protect property, not to protect people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if you're black, you're just fucked.
Yeah. Don't even bother.
It's very bad. It's very bad.
Anyway, can I once again, going back to innocent things and going back to the technology thing?
Yeah.
Does anybody remember not doing selfies, and when you went overseas or you went on holidays, you sent a postcard and a letter? When's the last time anybody sent a postcard to anybody?
I got a postcard
Can you
for
even
Christmas.
buy? You did? I wasn't even sure you could buy postcards anymore.
Yeah, I haven't even checked because you don't.
I don't think I've seen a postcard in a shop for probably 10 years.
It was.
I see them at pretty much any tourist place still. I don't know how many people use them, but I see
so
them.
they still have them.
Really? Yeah. I suppose it's probably still a cute thing to do, but you don't need it because you just post it on Facebook or Instagram, or you take a photo.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much people even intend to send them versus collect them or whatever.
Yeah, it'd be more a collectible thing now, wouldn't it? But what about? Well, I mean, even going back to letters, as you said. I mean, who writes letters? I can't remember. I mean, emails, sure, but actually sit with a pen and paper and write a letter. Yeah. Who does that?
Sorry to cut in. I gotta get going. So.
Okay.
Yeah, nice chatting with you all. Though.
See you, Millie.
Bye.
See ya.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Bye-bye. Something that modern society has done that really annoys the shit out of me when it comes to letters. And they say, oh, well, that was typewritten and printed. Well, yeah, but is it any less effort to type a letter for letter than it is to write one letter for letter? You know, it's exactly the same. Don't give me this crap that I didn't use a pen, so it's worthless and meaningless.
It's actually harder to correct it on a typewriter.
Depending on the typewriter. I mean, correcting typewriters have been around since the 70s.
I know, but even the correcting typewriters, bit of a hassle at best.
the IBM Selectric was a genius machine.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, that's like the last significant typewriter before everything exploded into what we are today.
Yeah, well, because word processing makes way more sense than typing.
Well, in the 80s, I needed to do a lot of text work. And the dot matrix printers that were available to the average home user were pretty much crap. They just, not good resolution. So the first
Even early laser printers didn't have much resolution.
Yeah, so the first computer printer I had was actually a daisy wheel typewriter with an interface card.
Yeah.
My first laser was 300 dots per inch.
Yeah, but you can predate that to there were 240 dot per inch lasers as well that were available.
Oh, really?
In the late 70s.
Yeah, but that was
and
the
I mean
only way. That was the
Sorry.
only way I could get a letter quality printer for under $1,000 in the mid 80s.
Yeah. So the 240 dot per inch lasers had no better resolution than early 24 pin dot matrices.
Yeah, I won't tell you what I paid for my dot.
They were faster, but yeah.
God.
It was, but it wasn't until you ended up with 600 DPI printers that you were actually looking at a good letter quality printout from a laser printer, because 300 DPI is just borderline, and depending on what you're actually wanting to print, some stuff didn't look great on a 300 dot per inch laser. So it wasn't until we got up to 600 DPI, and that didn't come out until about 83. But for consumer, I mean, you could buy professional laser printers that did higher resolutions, but you're spending 20. No one's going to buy a 20 grand laser printer for their business in the late 70s, unless of course you're like an IBM sort of people who probably were making it anyway.
Yeah.
My first
that's
laser
another
writer was
concept that younger
2500.
people wouldn't get, that even in an office environment, everybody wouldn't have a printer at their desk. There'd be like one central printer, so that you'd wind up, sending in your print request, and you'd have to walk down the hall and wait until it got to yours in the queue.
Yeah, and they weren't as fast as now either. I mean, you were looking at about maybe 5 pages a minute on those early lasers, even on an early laser printer, which was still the fastest. If you were using dot matrix or daisy wheel printers for printing your letters, they were even slower. So if there was a lot of printing, it took a long time before your stuff came out.
Here's one that'll really thrill the kids. My first scanner was called ThunderScan, and it was a device that you would take the ribbon out of your image writer, and you would put the device in there, put your original artwork on the rollers and roll it in like a typewriter, and then you would push all the magic buttons, and it would go back and forth one line at a time, scanning it, and it took about an hour and a half to do one page. And it cost.
You remember hand scanners?
That's what I was going to say. My first one was one of the hand scanners with the wheels that you had to roll it slowly over the page.
Oh, you had to be consistent, or your image would be stretched.
Yep. Well, and most of the early ones weren't even wide enough to do the full page, so you had to do it in 3 passes and get the 3 columns to line up right.
Yeah. You remember your first digital camera? Sorry, Al.
No. Jen, I know you like to get into all the technical,
I do.
little details and things. Can I just say something dumb, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, and you would watch Star Trek episodes, and they would be talking to each other on film, just like this. It was like a dream, like looking at someone's face and speaking to them somewhere else. Now, this is another awesome thing with technology and the internet.
Yeah.
Like I'm meeting all you guys, and I just think it's amazing. People from all over the world and different walks of life. And back then, when I was a kid in the 70s watching Star Trek, it was a fantasy. It was a dream. And now, we're sitting here doing it. So this is a positive thing.
And it is a huge positive with the internet that finding community is no longer restricted to your local geography.
Absolutely.
that we can actually
You're
have
literally
communities
making
that include
friends and
people
meeting
on
people
different
face to
continents.
face. Yeah. Yeah.
I
It
remember
does also mean
with,
that we are. Sorry, Jenny.
with
Like-
Star Trek, we thought the effects were amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I keep
Absolutely. And you
saying
look
that,
back at it and it's a bit dodgy.
I
There
keep
is
saying that,
something
that the
adorable
original
about
Star
those
Wars
old effects,
movies,
though.
that the
Yeah,
original Star Wars
there is.
movies back in the 70s, we were so dazzled by the special effects that we failed to realize how poorly written it was.
To be fair, it's still better written than all the
thing I
sequels.
Yeah,
remember-
that's an opinion, and a lot of us
The
disagree.
thing
with
I
you.
remember is that the closest analog, two analogs of the 60s, 70s, before all of this. One, pen pals. There was, you could have a pen pal, and
Yeah.
you'd write
Yeah.
letters back and forth. But it was, that's like so super narrow casting. It's like
True, because it's
you know,
literally
there's a-
one person. You're one
right,
pen
it's
pal,
one on one,
basically.
which is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But
And
still,
it's really slow.
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah, you
And
get
the
at
other
most
is
one letter a
ham
week.
radio. Ham radio was
Ham radio was the internet of its day
was the internet
for
of
those
its
who
day.
could afford it.
I never did
Yeah,
ham
for
radio,
those
but
who could afford it. Yeah.
yeah, in the 80s we had a CB radio.
Yeah, CB radios, yes.
You know, and
we had
most of
them
that
too,
was
yeah.
because my oldest brother was an over-the-road trucker.
Channel
You know,
19.
so we could kind of keep up with him somewhat on that. But even that, they had a limited range, and you had to get people to relay messages into the next state.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
They were short range unless you put up a single sideband antenna and punch about 5,000 watts into it, and then you'd get them busted by the feds.
Well, when Stephanie and I said that ham radio was the internet of its day, it literally was, because in the early days of computer, in the early 80s, there were a lot of people who modified modems so that they would work across ham radio, and that was how they communicated at 300 baud across the free wireless that they had, and people were sending files to and from. And I mean, it didn't matter back then. You were dealing with computers which only had 64K of memory. 300 baud meant you could send a file in a few hours. You know, a modern game might take that long to install over the internet because they're huge, but back then things were smaller, so you could send files, and this is how people got stuff sent around. And then all the kids at school would take their discs to school and share them with each other. This is something that we're missing now with the modern gaming generation, is that if you've got kids who want to play computer games, you have to buy them the computer games, because everything's online, everything's digitally signatured. You actually have to own the game that you're playing. There isn't the big market in secondhand games anymore, because the games are registered to the person, and there generally isn't a physical piece of software that people can have. There's not a disc or anything like that. Whereas when we grew up, if you had an early console like an Atari 2600, or even if you're a bit later than that and had an NES or something like that, you could buy a game. If you bought a game, you could play it, really enjoy it, then go and swap it with a friend at school, and you'd have an entirely different game that you could play.
Yeah,
that you do. But that doesn't happen now. If you've got friends who are if you're a kid and you've got friends who are playing a game and you want to try it out too at some point, you either have to go to their place and play it on their machine, or you're going to have to persuade your parents to buy this probably $100 game at this point, especially if it's new, which is quite expensive. I mean, I'm not saying games weren't expensive in comparison back then, but it's, and as Mage says, you can rent software now too, but that's still a case of your parents are paying a monthly fee so you can have access to these games on a modern console. And it's that consumer-driven thing where we're getting more and more expense for the things we have. Look at how we consume television now. Once upon a time, if you didn't want to pay for cable, you would eventually see all the shows you wanted to on free-to-air. That is not true anymore, and it's not even true for people with cable anymore. If you want to watch a broad variety of shows, you have to subscribe now to 501 different online services like Netflix, and that's the way it is. And originally, things like Netflix stopped people from pirating stuff because, hey, we can we can pay for Netflix and we can watch all these things and we're actually paying for them legitimately. But now there are so many services like Disney and Netflix and Amazon that it has become too expensive for people to subscribe to all of them to see the individual shows that they like, that piracy is bigger now than what it was 15, 20 years ago before Netflix. So
And with the
we've
writers'
gone to
strike,
the...
In the old
becoming more
days-
and more aware of the piracy that goes on within the companies that produce
Yes.
this fucking content.
Yep.
In the old days, we didn't have to put up with reality shows. But what
Yeah,
we did get
yes.
instead was, for example, ABC Friday Night Movie of the Week. And you'd see something that's just been out for a short time, a couple of months or 6 months or so. And now they're going to put it on TV, sometimes without commercials.
I must admit, that's one thing I do like about subscription services not having to have adverts. But yeah, do we? Yeah, sometimes our technology comes around and bites us on the ass, basically, and that's what's happened with subscription services. That they were a solution to a piracy problem, which have now created a bigger piracy problem because too many people put their hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah, when I originally subscribed to Netflix, they didn't have streaming. They were mailing the discs out to you,
Yeah.
which often got kind of screwed up because it's like if somebody didn't return a disc in time, they'd send you the next thing on their list. And it was oblivious to the fact that you were trying to watch a series that was on like 10 discs. So they sent you disc 6 before you ever saw disc 5.
And the first thing you do when it came in the mail is that you'd pull out the disc and copy it.
Yeah. Some of those just weren't particularly copyable, though.
Yeah, they had all sorts of different copy protection schemes on them.
Oh,
I was
had a
never
friend
that
who
good at
could get through
cracking 'em.
anything.
Well, it's another memory from the before times. Be kind, rewind.
Yep.
Yeah, oh, wow. Yeah. See, I always loved the ads like, you wouldn't steal a car. No, but if I could electronically print one, I probably fucking would. Yeah. There is... yes, piracy is still stealing, but there is not a direct analogy between that and the theft of a car. It is really hard to make that analogy because it's the intellectual property rights are different to physical things.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to see how they should have the same. They should, but it's hard for people to understand how they should have the same rights.
Well, because people think if you're making a copy, they feel they haven't taken anything away from who had it originally.
That's right. And there's also this aspect that when you buy, most people would think if you buy a DVD with a movie on it, you have bought that movie. But no, you haven't. You have bought a license to watch that movie. Not you. You
Right.
don't own the
You bought a
movie.
ticket.
The company that made the movie still owns the movie. Intellectual property rights are entirely different to owning a car. If you buy a car, you now own that physical car. You don't own the rights to make another car, but you do own that car.
Unless it was the first generation Chevrolet EV. Those the company retained ownership of and demanded that you turn it back in on a certain date.
Wow.
And if you didn't, they came and got it.
Damn.
Yeah. Because it was a theoretical car. It was like one of the first electric cars.
Can I just say the only problem with the internet, and I've dropped out and in, so I don't really know what the conversation is now. But I noticed before I left, Stephanie had a cigarette. And can I just say the only problem with the internet is that I couldn't ask her if I could have one. And then she
can.
passed it through.
Let me see if I can get it through the screen to you.
Well,
you.
I
It's
really
not
feel
working.
that is the next breaking technology they really need to focus on is how we can share food and drinks through the internet when we're having these chats.
This is my point. What are they doing? Come on, scientists.
They'll
Get your shit
perfect
together.
they'll perfect online sex machines that do what the other person is doing to theirs.
Yep, they do have what shall we say, adult
Replicators.
toys
We need
that will plug into
replicators.
your
You know,
USB port.
we need
Yeah,
Yeah.
virtual sex, I
really
suppose.
Yeah,
easily.
so that what you're doing on your keyboard will actually cause sensation in your partner.
Yep.
Yeah.
There is Wi-Fi sex toys. Yes. But I'm thinking more of an entire
learning
blow-up doll
things.
that'll do lots of different things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're
It'll
going to get
happen.
to the point that they're going to have a robot that somebody else can put on the VR gear and have the robot interacting with you, being their hands.
I just want to
Or you just have a VR gear that logs directly into the brain,
Okay.
and it's like a waking dream.
Yeah. So you're just lying there, but you're getting the whole experience.
So you're basically sitting there or laying
any
there. You're not
opinions on
really
the
moving,
panel
but you're
about
experiencing like
ChatGPT?
you are.
I just wanted to mention something when we were back there talking about piracy. In those days, I was a content creator, and I pledged to not ever copy anything that I did not buy, and I stuck to that to this day, because you are stealing food out of the children's mouths when you do that. And it's not just the artist; you're stealing from the audio engineer, from the disc producer, from the people who make the disc itself, the sound guy who arranged everything. It's a lot of people don't get their pennies off of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The record company makes 10, 20 times as what the artists and other technicians make. So
Yes.
that's a good point, actually. What was it? Was it Napster? Was that the first?
Napster, yeah.
Yeah.
The first
I remember
musical sharing thing, and everybody was up in arms, like, because people were just basically downloading music for free. I don't know that I ever used it, but because I'm a music creator rather than a music buyer or whatever, I suppose. But I recall that period of when it was like downloading music for free, and just what you were saying there, Millie. Taking people's copyrights, I suppose, for free, and that's their bread and butter. That's their money. That's how they earn their living. And things. Not that I'm against the technology of that, with downloading music and whatever, but you need to sort of give something or pay something to the
To
artist.
be honest, nowadays anybody who pirates music is an arse, because there are plenty of free ways to listen to music.
Yeah.
Which still get money into the pockets of the people. Like, you can listen to your albums on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, you might have to have ads in between, like what we used to when we were kids on the radio, but you can still listen to all that music for free. There is no excuse for pirating music.
Sorry,
I think
but
if you're privileged, I think if you're in a privileged position as a creator, as, let's say, for instance, the Grateful Dead were, you're going to make your money anyway. So their position was, we're going to make our money anyway. We don't care.
Yeah.
You can bring your tape recorders. You can do your bootlegs. You can do your stuff, and that's great. But I'm not sure that I am sure not every artist can afford to do that, and is in a position to be able to do that. Maybe it is a possible paradigm for music distribution. Like if you get enough of a following, you can make it. But I'm not sure that works. And I think Bandcamp does work for people very well.
Yeah.
I think that,
up to a point. Yeah.
Up to a point. But it's still, there's always that middleman, somebody in the middle.
Taking more money than the artist.
Unless you're busking, right? Unless you're standing on a corner with your guitar case open or your violin case open,
all the money is coming directly to you. That it's clean cut. You perform. money goes in your guitar case or
Okay.
whatever it happens to be.
I'm going to have to cut off here. We completely blew past the top of the hour. So I've
Wow,
had
we
dinner
did.
going in the slow cooker, and I have to bring it upstairs for the girls now.
Brilliant.
Okay. Well, look, it was lovely chatting
I
to you
thank
guys.
you all
I
for
had a ball.
for
Me
proving
too.
that we can do something on this channel where we actually stay on topic for more than an hour.
Mostly.
Yeah. That never happens on your channel, Purple, really.
No, it really hasn't. So, does anyone have any final words to wrap up or anything they want to plug before we go?
Not really. Thanks for having me. I had an absolute ball. You people are lovely. I wish you all the best, Lavender Lady.
Thank you.
Yeah, and really, that's it. It's lovely chatting to you, and I thought it was a really good topic, Purple. I think there's probably a lot of things that we didn't touch upon that we could have. It seems to me like you could do another stream similar with under the same topic. Topic, because it's a strong topic and it's really relevant. And
Actually, I had 3 pages of notes here because I was worried
Yeah.
about keeping the conversation going. So
yeah,
Yeah,
and
there's
you only used 2 of
2/3 of
them.
the stuff we didn't cover yet.
Yeah,
I'll have to
I
do
would
it
like-
again sometime.
I would like
yeah,
to say
for
one
sure,
thing.
absolutely.
The one thing I miss out of the old days, 50s, 60s, 70s, is then those days we knew that Australia existed, and now we're just, we just know it's not. And I miss it.
Yeah.
You know,
Now
the
you
one thing,
realize
Well, it's been proven by the flat earthers that it doesn't.
Well,
so there we go.
Okay, they do keep saying about how our
Yeah.
world is shrinking with the internet. So, something had to go and Australia got shed.
we did. Sorry, Jen, we don't exist, but we know.
Oh,
that.
no, we exist.
so-
We just live in a bunker in Idaho.
Ooh, Idaho, bad choice.
and one
Yeah,
thing
Art
that-
and I are going for a beer after this. We only
Well,
pretend we're on the opposite sides of a
Exactly,
non-existent
yeah.
continent.
Yeah.
one thing I do like about the
Hence next
technology
door.
today is that it's brought the past back to me. Pick something. Okay, in 1969, I was watching the coverage of the lunar landing and everything else. And once I had watched it, it was done. It was gone. But now I can go onto YouTube and I can get recordings of
Watch it over and over again.
yes, absolutely. And it's brought that past back to me. So
And they didn't lose the data.
Yeah.
right.
Well, and it really is amazing, how much stuff from the 80s and even the 70s, when home video really wasn't a thing, but yet somehow this stuff is showing up on YouTube. That somebody found a copy of it and scanned it into a computer and put it up on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the best things about the internet is nowadays, back in the old days, everybody had to have their VCR and never knew how to set the clock. Nowadays, everything's got a clock chip inside that automatically sets to what the internet says, time says. So,
Yes,
think about that.
And that is especially useful since we have not been able to kill daylight savings time. That my phone and computer will reset themselves on the appropriate day.
Oh wow! I would like to see. Daylight savings time go away. Move it a half hour.
don't
and
have
leave it
it.
there. Say again, huh?
We don't have it.
You lucky.
There's no daylight savings here. It's only annoying for me.
Are
when
we doing
you
New
have
South
it.
Wales?
Yeah. Well,
What
you're
I,
weird.
what I
Art.
want,
Probably
more
for
than
an
anything
idiot.
else, I want to be in the Atlantic time zone. It doesn't make any sense for me to have New Brunswick, which is on the same approximate longitude as Maine, to be an hour earlier. I want to be in the Atlantic time zone the entire time.
Yeah.
I don't care whether it switches back and forth. I want to be in the Atlantic time zone. I want to be an hour ahead of the rest of the country.
Well, daylight savings time needs to go away. And one of the problems I keep running into every year is that the US and the UK don't do it on the same weekend.
Right.
So, Usually, I'm 5 hours behind them. During a couple of weeks every year, I'm 6 hours behind them.
No, you're
And
6 hours
inevitably,
behind them
that
all the time.
always what?
You're 6 hours behind them all the time. It's in the mix up. It becomes 5 hours.
It depends which way we're going.
Yes, I'm plus 5 UTC, which
Yeah.
means plus 4 British time, standard or summer.
It's so hard to keep track of because I've got a friend
in the ass.
in Arizona. She's not in Phoenix, but she's kind of close to there somewhere.
Yeah.
But like her time zone's complete. I think it's 2 hours different to everybody else because most of the people that I speak to or communicate with like online are in America, and the time zones are kind of, you can make sense of some of it, you know, Central Time, New York time, blah blah blah, East,
Mountain
West,
time.
Central, yeah, Mountain Time. Well, that's where she is, I think. So she's in Phoenix somewhere, but she's always out by like a couple of hours. But that's all
That's
the
'cause
daylight
Arizona
savings
doesn't do the
thing.
flip.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's hard to keep track of, but
Yeah.
Indiana doesn't do the flip, and Arizona doesn't do the flip. So,
Yeah.
Well, it was especially
weird.
maddening where I lived in Michigan because the state of Michigan was not doing the time switch, except for the 5 counties that border Wisconsin, which meant that
The
for
UP,
half the
in other
year,
words.
when I crossed the county line, it was a different time zone.
Yeah.
so complicated. And Queensland, where because I'm on the East Coast, Queensland, they don't do daylight savings. So
Yeah, they're
always...
sensible like us in the West.
I know. Look, daylight savings. I
They're in
don't know.
Queensland,
Stupid.
they're
in
Like,
WA.
why
There's
bother?
There's some countries.
It's
in Asia
pointless
that-
in Australia. We have enough daylight as it is without you having to shift where the hours are.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
some
true,
countries
true.
in Asia that only change your clocks by 15 minutes.
Why?
Yeah, really?
I don't know.
Why?
Well,
I don't know.
The entirety of China is on one time zone, so that's
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
whatever
Okay,
time
well,
it is. That's the time it is.
I had been trying to wrap this up, and you people got me going
Yeah,
again.
sorry.
I know.
So, okay, I need to thank all my channel supporters. Skits Crasher, who was here in the side chat. I don't know if he's still lurking. Kitty the Atheist, Robert X, Lavender Lady, who is still here with us. Greg Hartwick, Southern Cell, and Vonrek. I appreciate all of you who, each send me a few dollars a month to pay my internet bill. So with that, I will bid you all a good day, and we will see you Wednesday afternoon.
Thanks, Purple. I'll see you at the pub, Jen.
Thanks,
Idaho.
Dad. Glad you came.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, you get him in. I'll be there in a few.
Purple.